take it away.
Yes, and I looked at the clock. We are a little bit behind, so I'm going to keep it brief, and I'm sure Jessica will do a much better job at introducing herself. But for the quick intro, Jessica currently lives in Switzerland. She's Canadian Indian. And I have to say, I love it when our guest is international. It just makes our chapter seem like we're not just stuck in the middle of Central Illinois. I just love having that, the different speakers and the different voices, basically. She is currently an Agile Coach for a pharmaceutical company over there. She's done a lot of high-profile chain projects. She has been in this industry for 20 plus years. She's currently the founder of Vanguard Voices. It's a nonprofit org that is dedicated to psychological safety. She's been doing a lot of engagements to try to bring psychological safety message out to the masses. And she's here to basically explain and give us a quick overview and share whatever insights that she has with us. She's been all over as far as her travels. So I think all of her experiences will come into play tonight, and we'll see all of that in her presentation. Jessica, do you mind taking over and share your screen and get us started?
Will do, with pleasure. All right, just 1 second. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this part of the presentation. Today, we're going to talk about psychological safety for you as project leaders and how it essentially catalyzes organizational excellence. As Florence mentioned, my name is Jessica Bensch. I am so honored to have the opportunity to speak about this topic that is so close to my heart. It goes straight into my bones because I know that this is a topic that holds immense importance for all of us, not just from a professional perspective, but from a personal perspective as well. So thank you again for joining. So as mentioned, I am an Agile Coach. My day job is in a large pharma company here in Switzerland. I'm also a certified life coach and certified in diversity education or as an executive. I have 6 flags on my door if you come to Switzerland. The 6 flags you will see are Canadian, Indian, my husband is German, South African, Philippines, and the Swiss flag on top to honor the country that we live in. And I actually should add another flag because we've taken in Ukrainians over the last 2 years. But what I'm trying to say is, from this perspective, I tend to look at everything from a collective perspective that is for the good of all. And that's why I identify myself the most as one who champions psychological safety. And that means prioritizing, measuring, monitoring psychological safety in organizations worldwide. I have personally witnessed and firsthand and experienced what it means when we have psychologically safe workplaces. I want everyone to feel free to express their thoughts, ideas, and concerns. And the reason I have this quote on the screen is because this is personally how I try to live every day, that you have to try to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. because what I stand for is a world where people can express their thoughts without fear of negative consequences. I stand for a world where people are valued for their distinct skills and talents, irrespective of where they sit in the organization. And I stand for a world for eye-to-eye conversations. That's why I founded Vanguard Voices, a not-for-profit association, because I truly think that it takes us building a global movement in order to bring psychological safety to the top of workplace agendas. So in terms of the agenda today, the primary goal, or the first goal today, is to just raise a little bit more awareness and a little bit of education on the critical importance of psychological safety, particularly in breaking down some of the silence or the culture of silence that we see in some of our organizations. I will also go through some actionable and tactical tools and strategies that can be applied, not just for us as individuals, but for the teams we serve on, and also for our organizations. And I truly believe you need to look at this from a holistic perspective, not just one or two, it's all three in parallel. And then finally, I will go through some points, hopefully to inspire you to join this global movement that we are building, because this is a collective cause, and that we're trying to elevate. You're going to have to excuse me. I've had a cough over the last couple of weeks, and hopefully will not disturb too much during the presentation today. It's that time of the year, I guess. Okay, let me start with a story before we get into it. So this is Ted that you see on screen. And Ted has joined a team, and every time he walks into a room, he feels that the atmosphere changes immediately. He can feel the undertone in that room. And he can feel at times that he's being mistreated and ridiculed by his peers behind the scenes. And he doesn't know what he did wrong. Nobody is telling him. Nobody's willing to share what they're thinking. And this is really disturbing him deeply. His close friends around him and, are actually advising him, don't do anything. You're going to get into trouble if you escalate this in any way. But he finally, at some point, mustered up the strength within him and thought, I'm going to do something. I am going to say something, and I'm going to go through the appropriate channels. And so that's what he did. He went through the appropriate channels in his company, and what he found was that the tables were turned on him. He became on the receiving end of the complaint. In other words, that he was being questioned as to whether he was doing something wrong, and really questioning, is he sure of the circumstances that he's in? And this was a place that was supposed to be a place of refuge and support for him. And actually, he left that meeting and those conversations just really shattered inside. And as a result, this impacted him mentally, so much so that it carried over into his weekends and his private time with his family. And, he would ruminate and reflect and reflect and reflect again about what was going on within this team. And so the cost of not saying something in our workplace, the cost or the silence of our employees, whether it's real or perceived, can be quite high. But the reality is it is quite normalized in many of our workplaces today. And when there is this silence can be deafening. So the question is, are our colleagues feeling safe in the workplace, or do they feel unsafe? I have a set of 12 questions that I'm going to ask, and I'm going to invite you to answer the question in your head and count the number of times out of the 12 that you say yes. Okay? So starting with number 1, have you ever felt excluded in a social setting? 2, have you ever been afraid to ask a question? 3, have you ever remained silent when you knew the answer to a problem? 4, have you ever had someone steal credit for something you did? 5, have you ever been ignored in a discussion? 6, have you ever been rudely interrupted in a meeting? 7, have you ever felt that you were the target of a negative stereotype? 8, have you ever faced retaliation for challenging the status quo? 9, have you ever had a boss who asked for feedback but didn't really want it? 10, have you ever been publicly shamed or made fun of? 11, have you ever been punished for making an honest mistake? And the last question, have you ever been made to feel inferior? If you feel comfortable, I would invite you to put your number in the chat. What I find most often is that most of us have experienced at least a few of these situations over the course of our working career. These are all examples of when we are psychologically unsafe. I'm going to move on. So what is psychological safety? Psychological safety is when you can express your thoughts and ideas without fear of negative consequences. What that means is you feel free and safe to speak up, and you know it's worth it. That means that you're, as opposed to that you're not speaking up, that you'll speak up, but you're thinking that it doesn't matter if you speak up. That's not psychologically completely safe. Or you're afraid to speak up, but the stakes are too high to remain silent, or it's simply not worth it. It's when you completely feel free to express your thoughts. There's a voice in most of our heads when we're making a decision on whether or not to speak up. And that voice in our heads is telling us whether or not we need to weigh on the expected successes and benefits of speaking up against the risk or the cost that comes from speaking up. And oftentimes, the outcome of such a voice that makes us stay silent or stay quiet, the outcome comes from gaslighting and toxic positivity. And I want to go through these two definitions in a little bit more detail. So gaslighting occurs when someone is manipulated into questioning their own reality. This is probably a relatively new term that has come up in the last few years. So I'll mention it again because just in case. It's when someone is manipulating you into questioning your own reality. So let me give you an example. You dare to risk and share what you think to your manager or to your leader. And you dare to share what you think and feel and to see how they respond. And how they respond is they are saying, no, you're incorrect. You don't feel that way, which of course is ridiculous. I mean, you can debate on facts and figures, but you can't really debate on how somebody else is feeling, right? Or how somebody can tell you how you're feeling. Your feelings are valid, regardless of what people say. So gaslighting can also happen when they also say things like, you're the problem, and they're trying to scapegoat the problem. Or they even make up a straight up lie. Or there's a coercion of some sort by saying, like, do this or else. So these are all examples of gaslighting, and all of these are forms of abdicating their role or responsibility as leaders. Let's move to toxic positivity, also a relatively new term in the last couple of years. Now, toxic positivity is a much more subtle form of gaslighting. And in this case, this is where you are allowed to only talk about good things and the future. So you're not allowed to talk about the past or talk about real challenges that are at hand. So imagine your company is laying off 30% of the workplace, and you are not allowed to talk about how you're coping and grieving. That's completely off limits. The question that comes back is, well, are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? So wishing negativity away is never a great strategy anyways. This toxic positivity is dysfunctional, to say the least, because what it's not doing is it's not acknowledging the emotions that come from, natural human emotions that come from difficult situations. So when we have psychological safety, what we're really talking about, what we're really stepping into, is we are unlocking collective brilliance. And collective brilliance means that we are really challenging the status quo. We are having hard conversations. This is not about being nice and all rainbows and, pink roses everywhere. This is about having hard conversations, but we're doing it with candor, and we're doing it with care and respect. And when we do this, we activate that collective brilliance. We exceed our customers' expectations, and essentially, people feel safe consistently and over time. So why does this matter? Timothy Clark has this wonderful quote that says, an organization can have everything, including a clear vision and brilliant people, but if it does not have psychological safety, colleagues cannot work together effectively. Psychological safety holds immense significance for any organization. And let me break it down into where we need to focus. The first point is that it is the cornerstone of success. It is the bedrock upon which diverse and inclusive environments can thrive. All the research points in this direction. You can look at Google Projects Aristotle. There is the work of Amy Edmondson. It is the foundation for success for any team or organization. Second point, addressing unjust practices. So for many of us who have been working for some time, it's not hard to find unjust practices, toxic workplace cultures that continue to prevail today. And oftentimes, or sometimes, company values only exist in rhetoric rather than with real or tangible actions to back them up. And so what's happening is fear tactics and double standards, inequality, failure to uphold those values, then tarnish people's psychological safety, only to undermine the trust and compromise the company's purpose. Third point, lack of support and knowledge. So employees within an organization often lack reliable internal support, and then what happens is they feel isolated, disempowered when challenging certain issues, because there's an absence of robust systems, processes, and follow through, and that just exasperates the erosion of trust. So obviously, psychological safety creates a supportive environment, and it provides individuals with the knowledge and resources that are needed to affect meaningful change. And then the last point here, I already briefly touched on, it's the empowering of diversity and inclusion. Psychological safety plays a pivotal role in promoting diversity and inclusion. I didn't put it on the slide, but you can actually think of it as a pyramid, where psychological safety is the foundation, is on the bottom of the pyramid. This allows for inclusion, which then treats diversity and then facilitates the overall company performance. So think of psychological safety as the enabler for D&I initiatives to thrive. And quite frankly, diversity without psychological safety is nothing more than an illusion. So there is an urgency for psychological safety in our workplaces today. Here are some reasons to double down on this point. One is competitive edge. We're all working in fast-paced business environments. Innovation is absolutely critical. And psychological safety enables us to have the dialogue and the risk-taking that's needed, and that's all essential components of an innovative culture. But if we delay in fostering such a culture, we're only putting our own companies at a competitive disadvantage. Second, employee turnover. If we have high levels of employee attrition, this will be costly and disruptive to any organization. But if you foster psychological safety, this significantly improves employee retention. And it's important to act quickly before people become disengaged and leave. Mental health, a big topic, especially over the last few years, especially since COVID. If we have an unsafe psychologically environment, this only contributes to stress, burnout, other mental health issues amongst our employees. And these conditions, they can rapidly deteriorate and making it urgent to address more sooner than later. Legal and ethical risks, cultures that lack psychological safety harbor harassment, discrimination, and other unethical behaviors. And if we do not address these behaviors swiftly enough, we only expose the organization to those legal and ethical risks. And social media doesn't take long for news to travel fast. Foundational culture, again, if you have psychological safety from the beginning, particularly for new teams or startup organizations, psychological safety is the first place that it needs to start in terms of establishing the right culture to set the tone for all future interactions and developments. It's so much easier and more effective to build psychological safety into the foundation in the beginning than to try to retrofit it later. Okay, so given all these factors, there is an urgency for implementing psychological safety. It's not just a nice to have. Let me take you to the next story, Struggling in Silence. So this is a picture of Sarah, and Sarah is really struggling. She has an internal battle within her about how she feels she needs to be on the team versus how she really feels inside. So what she's noticing is a very sobering reality of underhanded tactics that are going on within her team and in her workplace. Tactics such as whisper campaigns, side conversations that are filled with gossip, microaggressions delivered with a smile on the face, undermining of her work, and other covert actions. These corporate chess moves are just simply exhausting. And for her, she feels like she needs to put a mask when she comes into the office. And what that means is she needs to pretend to be interested in projects that she's not. She needs to suppress her emotions, else she's seen as unprofessional. She needs to fake enthusiasm for the company's mission when she's really not passionate about it. Pretend to know more than she actually does in order to avoid looking incompetent, and just going along with the crowd even if she doesn't agree with them. These type of feelings that Sarah has, this inauthenticity, this inability to bring out her true self, it does run rampant in many organizations. That's especially in organizations where psychological safety is not nurtured. But it does take all of us to find a way to stand up and express ourselves. How can we do it? Let me take you to the first slide in terms of some tactics or practical steps from that we can take as individuals first. So first, I have to say that as a coach in my day job, life coach and agile coach, I'm a big proponent for coaching. And there is so much value when you are talking to somebody who is able to reflect some questions and be able to enable you to have that self-reflection within. So here are some questions that could be asked either for yourself or from a coaching partner. So the first couple of questions is really grounding yourself in terms of what am I feeling right now? You know, this is the first step to like managing your feelings, or what is triggering these feelings, recognizing what are the events or events or thoughts that led to this current state. Another couple of questions, maybe, you know, for example, Sarah could ask, what are the facts and what are my interpretations? Or another question I tend to ask is, what's the story I'm telling myself? Yeah. So separating what is actually happening, you know, in your story that you're telling yourself from the facts. So looking at this from a situational perspective, is this a one-time issue or is this part of a pattern? Now we go into problem solving. What are my options for addressing this issue? What would I advise a friend to do in this situation? Sometimes it's easier to think more clearly when considering somebody else's issue, which is why it's helpful to think from a friend perspective. Maybe from a broader perspective, you could ask, what can I learn from this experience? And gauging the long-term significance, how important will this issue really be in 1 week, a month, or a year from now? And then finally, in a couple of questions for self-care and support. What can I do right now to feel a little better? And who can I reach out for support or guidance? So these questions are really from an individual perspective, it's only a starting point to get to an understanding on, you know, the circumstances and the needs of the individual involved. Okay, it just enables you to have maybe that much more improved mental clarity on complex emotional or situational challenges. Okay, now I'm going to move to teams. And before I move to the practical strategies for teams, I'm going to give you another story. Now, this is Lena. And Lena has a new boss who has joined their team. And this boss has asked for feedback, but she can tell that he doesn't really want it. He says, my door is always open. I value your feedback. And, you know, with that, you know, comes this nice smile. And it seems so innocent the way he asked for feedback. And he does this for the entire team. But what her experience was when she goes into a meeting with him, she feels her voice is stifled behind the closed doors in order to maintain the status quo. Her ideas are cherry-picked to be aligned with her boss's agenda, while conveniently ignoring anything that challenges his authority or ego. So this facade she can feel is really demoralizing because she's giving the best of her ideas, but it's not really being taken in the best way. And what happens is over time, this takes a toll on her. And over time, she has what's called workplace PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And what happens is she starts to carry this month after month, year after year. Even if she moves to another team, she finds herself not trusting the new team. And she finds herself keeping silent and being guarded. She's finding herself like that is such a hurdle to overcome because of these experiences that she had in this team. So what could she do about it, or what could the team have done to avoid this? So I have a few slides here. Many of them are high level, but I feel that it's worthwhile to go through. I also want to mention that this can apply whether we're in person or remote. Yeah, so it takes into account remote teams as well. Now, a big part of a team is getting to know each other. And so having simple connecting rituals like a tune-in in the beginning. How are people feeling coming into this meeting? Tune out in the end. What have we learned from this meeting? Is already, before getting into agenda topics or running off to the next meeting, having these connecting rituals are so powerful for any team when they come together. What I often see personally as an agile coach, and at least in my organization, so many teams have not defined their purpose, like a couple of statements that actually say, what are we gravitated to as a team? And what are our values? What is important to us as a team that brings us together? This is all part of a team canvas or team, board that is ideally put together when a new team comes together. So what else? Practical steps. Teams should listen and pause. They should ask twice as much as you speak. Share your story, learn your story. This is all about human connection, but also learnings, that we are having, in the workplace. Actively asking for feedback, share what you're currently learning, ask questions to activate the learning, implement a rotating facilitator. You don't always have to have the same person or the team leader being the facilitator. That can easily be a rotating role. A big one I also see is sometimes we don't clarify who's doing what in a very clear, black and white way. Those, who are the roles, who are the accountabilities, and how are we making decisions? One tactical, thing that we use for decision making is FIST to 5. Decision making 5, I widely agree. FIST means I don't agree at all. And 1, 2, 3, 4 is something in between. It's a very easy way, especially like, if you're on a call like this, for just ask people, okay, we're ready to make a decision. Put up your hand. What's your number? And anybody who's 2 or below, they don't agree with whatever the decision is, they need to come back, go offline and come back with a proposal. So these are ways for teams to not have side conversations, but put them on the table during the meeting, aligning together. Again, back to a team canvas. I've seen it in today's meeting. You are using, chats and polls. These are all, wonderful tools that come with Zoom or, these tools these days to enable interaction. Inviting people simply even to turn on videos is a nice way, of course, for meetings, but always recognizing that there are sufficient breaks, breakout rooms, checking in. How is a presentation or how is this meeting? Give it a scale of 1 to 10, put it in the chat, helping others to see their strengths, encouraging them to contribute, actively asking colleagues what to think, what they think, be an ally to the struggling colleagues, and implementing tension meetings. This is a wonderful practice to put in. Tension meetings is essentially about, if you have a tension or a feeling like that something is not going right in the meeting, you set aside time in your meetings to actually put those kind of what we call stinky fish on the table in order to have a discussion. It takes a very mature team to talk about this. I would refer you to the Nonviolent Communications website for more information on this. I'm also mindful of the time. And then I have one more slide I wanted to show here in terms of practical advice. Formulating team agreements, really important as part of that team canvas. I put here an example of a few words. Sometimes team agreements just come down to one word, and like values like courage, passion, integrity, that's not enough. These, I believe, are really great examples because it goes into a little bit more detail of what an agreement is truly within a team. And I'll just read the first one. Staying curious. This is not the time to shrink or defend. This is the time to become and stay curious. That's what one particular team came up with, but every team will come up with something different specific to their makeup. All right, so now I'm going to move to organizations. So we often hear this word workplace culture, but what do we really mean with the word culture? And I personally love the definition that comes from Patty McCord, who used to work for Netflix and does a lot of Yeah, just does a lot of talk around workplace culture. Her definition is, what are the real stories in the workplace? What are people saying in the hallways as opposed to what we see on the walls? And how aligned are we with what we say, with what we do? That is culture, according to her. And culture, those workplace stories, those are the ones that dominate, irrespective of what companies say on the glossy magazines. That's what truly dominates in any organization. What you tolerate is what you will get, and that becomes your culture. So oftentimes people ask, what is the culture in your organization? Well, the question is, what are you tolerating? And I'll give you another quick story around this. So here we have Amanda. And Amanda here has a new boss who has joined the team, and he is a brilliant jerk who has joined. And that means what's happening is that she's being bullied. Some of her peers are being bullied, and she tries to share her experiences with others, but all they do is just listen and watch. And the antics just continue. Nobody speaks up. There's too much of a personal risk. Nothing changes. People are not even appalled because such bullying tactics are common in their workplace. It's just the way it is. At least that's what the way people tell themselves. So it is important to know that in any company, even if somebody is brilliant, there is a cost if they are a jerk that goes with it. So to me, there needs to be organizational actions taken as well. A lot of people talk about psychological safety at the individual level and at the team level, but you can never have true psychological safety unless you look at this at the organizational level as well. And I break this down into 3 focus areas. One is there needs to be broadened education. 2, there needs to be increased transparency. 3 is collective accountability. So what do I really mean when we say this? So broadened education. Imagine if everyone in your company were required to take training on a regular basis. I'm not talking about a webinar like this that's 1 hour and then it's a one and done check mark exercise. No, regular, once a year. It's top of mind. It's prioritized in the organization. Second, increased transparency. Many of companies do employee engagement surveys. Imagine if these companies were publishing the comments that go with the engagement surveys. I know in the companies I've worked for, we usually just see top line numbers, but the real meat, the real juice is in the comments. And it's those comments, if you bring them out into make them more transparent, you give people the permission to have the hard conversations that we need to have in order to create that psychological safety. They carry a lot of weight. Maybe another example on transparency. Imagine if we were sharing comments that came out of exit interviews. That's if your company even does exit interviews to begin with. Imagine if you had a system that was in place to report grievances, and the number of those grievances were shared transparently. In the companies that I've worked for, this tends to be something in HR or in one department, but at least numbers, because this is all about upholding psychological safety together. And that's why transparency, at least in this respect, can also help. Collective accountability. One example here is upwards feedback. We're at the tail end, at least in my company, of the performance feedback season, but many of us don't give upwards feedback. It's just not a given. It's more 360, but there's no upwards. Upwards feedback is a way at all levels that could be instituted, and then people are getting, basically real thoughts and real feedback at every level. And maybe another example for collective accountability, because leadership has a big role to play when it comes to psychological safety. Imagine if anyone who was promoted into a leadership position, they had to prove they had a track record in nurturing psychological safety. So it's not just their brilliance that comes in, it's their skill, it's the attitudes that come with that as well. All right, so essentially to change culture in any organization, I truly believe it takes a movement. And it takes a sustained, intentional effort, and it does take effort at all levels of an organization. It starts at the top, that's for sure, but you do need to look at this top down, bottom up, side to side. And I know this because 5 years ago, I stood up on a stage in my company and we started a grassroots movement within. And I truly believe that times are changing. This is the time where employees can speak up, companies are listening. We just need a way to collectively come together in order to focus and basically coordinate efforts. That's why I started Vanguard Voices. I truly think that, as I've said already, a global movement is needed on psychological safety, and our mission is to bring this to the top of every workplace agenda around the world. We believe in eye-to-eye conversations, irrespective of where we sit in the organization. That's essentially what we're talking about. We can put in all these interventions and strategies that I mentioned before, but in its core, all we are talking about is eye-to-eye conversations. Our why for our association is to inspire people essentially to activate and live out our unique purpose, because each one of us does have a purpose, and each one of us can do our part in creating essentially a more beautiful world together. Oh, it keeps going. Okay, these are the principles that we hold deeply: unwavering integrity, passion, courage, collaboration, and authenticity. I do want to say, because the term movement can be misconstrued, what we're doing is, this is not about angry protest movement. This is not naming and shaming individuals or organizations. This is a positive thing that is meant for the good of all. And so we truly believe in the power for change, and that happens when we come together as a community. And that's why I love this quote: there's no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about itself. And a big part of what Vanguard Voices is doing is already collecting stories. We need to bring these stories to the forefront. Too many people are suffering in silence. And this is just one example that we've collected. And we personally always keep keep the anonymity of those who are submitting the stories. We need to see more commitment to psychological safety, and we actually just released a digital badge. If you make a commitment, at least through our website, you'll get a digital badge. This person has made her commitment, and with this digital badge, it can be posted on the LinkedIn profile. And I just want to say, like, if this is a topic that is of interest to you and you truly believe, as I believe, in this cause, there is an opportunity to join an online community. We are just in the process of building this. And we are also organizing what's called a Speak Up Summit in June. It's going to run for 24 hours. It's a virtual event. I'm super excited because of the speakers that we have lined up. We are getting the best of the best when it comes to this topic and overall workplace culture. This is something I believe you do not want to miss. And so I'm just going to wrap up this presentation. Psychological safety is an immense topic. It is an important topic. And I just ask that if you are interested in this and you want to help, feel free to invite us to your company to speak like this. Join our community, invite us, invite your teams to come to our summit. We are a not-for-profit you know, heck, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, my time. I love like this topic so much because I know that together we can make a difference. And if you don't have the time to be able to give your time to this, as I said, it's not for profit. There is a donation um, button on our website where you can give. So I just want to wrap it up here. I know we're close to time. I just want to say, Brené Brown has a wonderful quote, and it says, and she says, courage is contagious. If we have mass numbers of people who are saying the same thing, imagine the change that we can make in our workplaces. Because the heroes of this story are not the ones who are simply going to talk about change. We have the passion and we have the conviction to align our words and our actions together. The heroes of this story are not going to keep quiet and not going to perpetuate the status quo. We are going to confront our own fears and speak out our truth, because our truth is powerful. And we are the ones together who will dare greatly and through those thoughtful, significant actions. Thank you so much for the time today. Feel free to join up through our website if you're interested, and I appreciate very much your time.
You have a question, Florence?
No, I don't. I was just looking at the chat to see if there are any. Lots of kudos. Yes, practical steps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was wonderful. Excellent information. This is a topic that totally resonates with me. So I am very, very thankful that you are our first speaker of the year to set the tone. So thank you so much, Jessica, and especially, as you said, 2 o'clock in the morning in Switzerland, no less, to talk about this. This was just wonderful. Thank you. Oh, one other thing for those of us for PDUs, I am going to put it into the chat if no one has already done that. If I can find it.
It's in your DM.
No, I mean, where's the chat button? I just lost it all of a sudden.
Well, Ingrid does that. Thank you, everyone. But I also want to add, we have Caterpillar, who won the PMI Project of the Year, going to speak to us in February. So if you haven't registered for that, please do. I just want to give a shout out because I know we have Caterpillar people on here. And it's I'm looking forward to that event. So if you haven't registered, go to our website and do that. It looks like she's got the code there.
Yes, exactly. This is the code that you need, so it makes it very easy to go ahead and submit your PDUs. Everyone, thank you for coming out for our kickoff meeting. We're looking forward to a wonderful 2024, and be on the lookout for all of our wonderful information and invite, social media, all of that, and be looking out for volunteer opportunities. We will be I will be knocking on some people's doors, and I see a couple of people who I've seen applications from, and yes, I have not forgotten you. I will be contacting you. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yes, good night, everybody.
Thank you.